this this man Hornships, he was, I don't know if he was the leader, but I would say he was the leader. Looking at it as I understand it, he was the leader of them all. But he wasn't the leader as he was standing out and saying, I'm the boss. He was actually, as they say, the humblest man on the earth at that time. But because of that, he was also the most powerful man on the earth. So humility in this way, in leadership, go hand in hand. There's no such thing as power in leadership. There's only humility in leadership. And the more humble a person can be, then the more they can be acknowledged and recognized and be a leader. And actually on a spiritual level of working with this kind of ability, the more humble you are, the more powerful you are. So it's almost like the opposite paradigm as we have in the Western world. Oftentimes, as we know, you probably have heard the studies, where sociopaths often become the CEO, or not often, but whatever it is, like 30% of the time or something. Like, it's the ones that actually don't have connection that rise up into positions of leadership. So it's the opposite reality, where humility actually indicates leadership. So this man, Gilbert Walking Bull, he had all this knowledge and he had all this experience. And him and his cousin, they shared a lot of that. And the other cousins, there were other ones as well. They shared that wisdom, that knowledge, that experience, that cultural lineage. And they helped everybody they could, because that's another unique thing about this lineage and the Lakota people in general. But this particular lineage, they are actually, through that principle of humility, they cannot restrict this to anybody. They can't say this is ours. They can't say this is the Lakotas. They can't say this is only for Native Americans. They can't even say actually that this is only for human beings, because it's not. Which gets really interesting, because what if it's all not even about us? What if it's about the animals? What if it's about the plants? And that we are just secondary to that, right? That we are given these gifts like the drum and the inipi, so that we just don't go crazy and kill everything, right? Anyways, maybe we'll come back to that sometime. So we have this man, Gilbert Walking Bull, and he has all of these cultural tools and understandings that he was raised with and that they spoke about and that they shared. And his work was, of course, with his own people, right? But the problem is when you're ostracized from your community and when you're labeled, in this way that they did, which it wasn't just like a convincing of a person through, some sort of concept. It was actually through starvation. Because if you didn't go to church and you didn't, prescribe to what the BIA said, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, then you didn't eat. If you didn't eat, you died, right? So there was a control system here. But because, a few generations of people now grew up, by the time Gilbert got old, the people couldn't accept his teachings anymore. So what he did is he left the reservation and he started to travel around the country. And, as we say, synchronistically enough, synchronicity guided him to this man, John Young. And so he ends up out in this Washington state at this really, it's like a kids camp that John Young's running, right? And they knew each other from before, but at this point in time, he's really looking to do something, and John's doing his work. And John has this camp for these young men and these young women who really haven't been able to fit into society at all. They haven't been able to fit into the mainstream culture, and their parents, most of them, didn't want them to. Some of them also were, there because they were actually in hiding, because they had gotten in trouble in the cities, and that this was somewhere safe in the woods that they could actually stay. So these children weren't just like the cream of the crop, the star students. These children were children that were coming from broken homes. They were coming from poverty. They were coming from drug abuse and use. But what would happen, of course, is that as they were going through this nature connection experience, is that they would start to shine. Eventually they'd pull the headphones out of their ears and take their hoodies off, and then they'd start interacting. And eventually they would start being really excited about spinning fire out of a bow drill or hand drill. Eventually they would be able to do things like gather wood without having to be told again, that we need wood. If you want to be cold, we can be cold, but if you gather wood, we can actually have a fire, right? And they wouldn't have to be instructed. They became full of empathy and understanding for nature. They understood the language of the birds and the movement of the animals on the land. They understood the value even of the grass, the little trees. They had compassion and understanding for that. They understood how to just be helpful when there was something to be done. They got up and they did it. They understood how to be at peace with themselves and with people and with nature. They understood how to show their love, express their emotions, be in connection with one another. They had happiness and laughter. So they had these things. They had the youth, the vitality of youth, right? And they also had their health. They had these qualities, and they were demonstrating these qualities, not because they had to, not because there was some punitive reaction that the adults would give them. They had these qualities because, one, they were allowed to off-gas. They were allowed to actually do what they wanted to do up into the point where they had enough of that and then they wanted to join in. And that was allowed at that point. They also had enough of, they had these qualities because enough of these children had already gone through this process that these ones that were a little senior became mentors to the ones that were newer. So they were following this natural pattern. They also had this pattern because they would go out onto the land like we did all day long. And they would, get wet and they would get cold. Maybe they would get hot. They would get a little tired. But eventually they would come back to the campfire with an armload of wood, spin a coal, and then sit around the campfire and then tell their stories to the adults who would listen very, very intently and ask questions. So Gilbert steps into the situation and he does a little teaching, and talks a little bit to these children. But this man Gilbert, as Godfrey was, incredibly observant. Not just observing, behavior and patterns, but observing spirit stuff too, right? Whatever that is. They observe all of it, and then they start looking at, okay, what's going on here, And they don't jump to conclusions or they don't say anything right away. They just sit back and they watch. But what happened was Gilbert saw these young people moving across the land in this way, and he had come to teach them something, to talk to them about his culture and about what his background, what his childhood was like. And he got really excited all of a sudden. And he said, these children hold the 7 sacred attributes, what they call the Wokpe Shako Iwakan. These children hold the 7 sacred attributes, and he was really excited. He said, this is what the elders would look for. These people are the ones that would become the sitting bulls and the crazy horses. These would be the leaders of the next generation. These children hold these attributes. And in this story, of course, John, he sits back, because he looks, he says, he never really noticed, Well, first he asked, what are those attributes, right? What are those characteristics that they would look for in the leadership, the future leadership? And Gilbert lists them out, and then John steps back and looks. And that's when he realizes that all the children that he worked with over the years developed those characteristics. So, a lot came out of that experience. And there's a lot of information in that we can't go into the depth that I'd love to go into because of our time frames, but the 7 sacred attributes is how that's translated. The 7 sacred attributes. In Lakota, it's actually Wokbe, Shakoi, Wakan. Wokbe is the law, right? Wokbe is the law, but it's like nature, the natural law. It's nature itself and the rules of how people are in relationship with nature. So that's Wokbe. Shakoi is the number 7. So that's fairly straightforward, even though nothing in this is straightforward after a while. And then Waka is a difficult one, but it's usually translated as sacred, but sacred's not the right translation. Lakota was translated originally by Jesuit missionaries, so they took the language and they put it into the context of their reality. So, if you look at what's sacred, then you oftentimes find that some things that are sacred are special, like kept away, and then that they're only taken out for certain ceremonial type events, and then they're put back away, right? Religious events in particular. Waka actually doesn't mean that. The closest that we could get in English, I think, in one word is mysterious. It's mysterious. But if you break it down a little bit further than out of that mysterious kind of translation, what you find is that it is about a connected relationship. It's about connection. Ka it literally means the parts of your body that transmit or conduct energy. So a vein is ka, an artery is ka, a sinew is ka, a nerve is ka. That's what ka means. So wa is all of them. So one way to look at this is that ka are the ropes of energy. But it's not the ropes of energy just in our body, it's the ropes of energy that are moving through creation in all its many forms. It's the movement of energy. Wa is all of those energy movements. All of them. So it has to do with connection. Let's put it that way. This Waka has to do with connection. So if you put that and say the laws of nature, the 7 laws of nature, the 7 rules of nature that you're connected to, that's what it means. Or you are the 7 laws of nature. So it's about a person, a child, or anybody, an adult, an elder that is in relationship with nature to the degree that this energy of nature is now becoming them, that it's flowing through them, and it's not like I'm a person and this is nature. It's not that divided dualistic mindset. It's that I am nature. And that the qualities, the highest qualities of nature are now existing within me. There's ways to draw that out, obviously, through the story. There's ways to draw that out of the children. There's ways to move that through the children, through the process of mentoring, through the process of nature connection leadership. Understanding this to actually bring about the next generation of connected leaders who are humble, who are in relationship with nature, who are nature. The people that would fight, not literally fight, but maybe, okay, but they would live and defend nature as they would their own families because it's not anything different. There's no difference between nature and our human family because we are the same. And one depends upon the other. It's an integrated, integral relationship. It works together when we actually hold these attributes of nature. So these attributes, and I'll just really quickly list them off in case you don't already have them. And I won't go into it any further than that because they go deep. But it's peace, love, empathy, vitality, truly helpful, health, and happiness. Truly helpful.
Truly helpful?
Helpful.
And what else did you say? Sorry.
Health and happiness. Yeah. which like everything in this, it's going to seem really simple at first, but as you kind of peel back these onion layers, you're going to, you know, at some point in time, everybody gets to the place where like your mind is blown. Like you're like, what? Okay, you know, now I'm impressed. So these attributes, this man John Young recognized were in all these children that he was working with. Not at first, of course. They didn't come in that way. But through this nature connection experience and with these mentors and following these ancient patterns, you know, these patterns they're not something new. You know, most of nature connection actually isn't new at all, right? The relationship that we have now to bring it back from this modern, disconnected society that we have, this postmodern society, as we say, into the world as it is new, absolutely.